Hello, my name is Jacob Bennett, and I will be presenting my final for mental illness. This presentation is being conducted on April 29th, 2021. The mental illness that I chose is major depressive disorder or severe clinical depression. This mental illness is abbreviated as MDD, but it's essentially prolonged and intense feelings of sadness or sorrowfulness. And MDD is actually one of the most common mental illnesses within the United States. Somewhere around 7% of Americans suffer from this mental illness. While this is a treatable disorder, we do find that many people, because of the state that it puts your mind in, really don't seek out help. So it's just something that persists and doesn't get the proper attention that it needs. The symptoms are as follows. There's, as we mentioned before, persistent feelings of sadness and or irritability. The metric here is if it's longer, 2 weeks or longer that you're experiencing these feelings, then we would start to consider that to be within the realm of major depressive disorder. Another side effect is that hobbies and other activities that you enjoyed in the past start to become less enjoyable. You get less of those reward sort of chemicals coming to your brain from performing things that you like to do. We also do see in some cases people suddenly gaining or losing weight just depending on the changes in their appetite due to this disorder. Some people start binge eating and some people have no appetite at all. There's also trouble sleeping. Some people feel a sense of restlessness, but with nothing really to do. And then other people feel fatigued, just a constant drain on their energy. There's also severe drops in self-esteem, which might be one of the common symptoms that people associate with this disorder the most, but it's these general feelings of feeling worthless or guilty, basically an overreaction to something happening to where a person feels personally responsible or worthless for committing a very small infraction or making a small mistake. There's also the symptom of a difficulty concentrating on things. The people that are suffering from this disorder have trouble studying, maintaining their grades at times if they're in school, or focusing on work and things like that. And then lastly, we do see in some cases people have thoughts of self-harm or suicide, wanting to hurt themselves, and sometimes acting on it, unfortunately. So, what are some of the causes of major depressive disorder? Well, the general idea is that there are chemical imbalances within your system that can lead to major depressive disorder. However, with more and more studies being done, we're finding more specific and detailed scopes of what is happening. Most importantly, what we found is that stress, or the stress hormone called cortisol, is playing a very key role in the development of this disorder, and it's because of how it affects the brain. For example, we find that the hippocampus is actually stunted in its growth by a continuous bombardment of stressors and the stress hormone. We found that people that had PET scans performed on them that were clinically depressed often had much smaller, around 13% smaller hippocampus than the average person. Researchers have started to realize that the more stressed a person is and the more that cortisol is flowing, less nerve cells develop within the hippocampus. And this area is responsible for things like memory. So this can also have an effect on your ability to recall things. Additionally, we noticed that this influx of cortisol is causing a hyperactivity within the amygdala. This is the part of the limbic system that's responsible for things like anger and feelings of sadness and feelings of fear. With this hyperactivity, you become much more sensitive to triggers that would cause these sorts of emotions, and it's harder to snap out of those feelings. Stress in and of itself is looked at to be a pretty sizable trigger when it comes to causing major depressive disorder, especially chronic stress. This can occur in many different places in your environment, whether it's work, at home, raising children, if you have lost someone, if you're moving, if there's trauma from your past that you're holding on to, struggling with school. There's many different things that can cause this. But ultimately, if it is left unchecked, it can lead to severe depressive disorder. An additional cause, and this may come as a little bit of a discomfort to some, but researchers have also found that genetics have a decently sized trigger for depression. We see that our genetic makeup can actually greatly influence our susceptibility to disorders like MDD. Research within genetics has shown that we've seen a lot of patterns within family members passing down these sort of mood disorders, things like MDD, but also things like bipolarism or even schizophrenia. You're much more likely to have one of these in your life if a member of your family had it as well, an immediate member. Beyond that, though, our predisposed temperament, the way that we sort of act and behave and view the world, is something that's passed down in our genetic makeup to a certain extent, and that just goes to influence how we perceive the world, how well our resistances are built to traumatic events, how well we're able to deal with stress, how pessimistic we can become, or optimistic, or how realistic we are. And that also just feeds into later effects of possibly causing MDD. So we wanted to talk as well about the biopsychological effects that occur. We did talk a little bit about what happens in the brain as a cause of the stress hormone and specifically the introduction of clinical depression and how it affects the brain. But large amounts of this stress hormone and being clinically depressed does affect different parts of the brain with different types of dysfunction. Notably, with the lack of growth in the hippocampus, researchers were able to find that depression, in fact, does lead to memory issues. In addition to that, the thalamus is also disrupted by the changes in cortisol. This area of the brain is responsible for things like sensory function, so the way we feel or perceive things through our senses, as well as our capability to learn and obtain and retain information. And with this not activating properly, we're seeing that people are experiencing this lack of sensation of being able to connect with the world around them, as well as an inability to focus on anything, which we've seen are both our symptoms of major depressive disorder. Arriving at a conclusion, it is apparent that as we learn more about depression, we're finding that it's less about trying to balance chemicals within our body and more so attacking the root cause, which is stress levels in a person's life leading up to the event or leading up to the disorder. There is a underdevelopment of some parts of the limbic system and in hyperactivity in other areas that are caused by chronic stress. And chronic stress itself is caused by situations in someone's life or a genetic predisposition to stress, and it opens them up for a risk of things like major depressive disorder. But by recognizing these issues early on, we are able to help prevent these more severe disorders, having people reach out and talking with counselors or therapists is a viable solution to dealing with stress, as well as taking time to recenter yourself, be kind to yourself. Meditation and other practices have been shown to help reduce stress. And ultimately, that would be the goal in curbing the amount of people that are suffering from major depressive disorder. But outside of that, it is also just looking for the warning signs within individuals that may not be willing to seek out help on their own, and giving them the opportunity to do that, maybe pointing them in the right direction or encouraging them to get help. But with that being said, this does conclude my presentation. So I do appreciate everyone listening to this. And if you have any questions, please let me know.